I want to ask you about another emerging Bitcoin and computational problem that's coming up, and that's quantum.
Aha, yes.
I mean, we can already see the problems AI is creating. So, whether that be trying to find these bounties or cracking codes potentially. Obviously, there's all types of levels of phishing attacks that AI has been able to do. And we talked about Coinbase earlier. Like, Coinbase hasn't been hacked, but they've lost hundreds of millions of dollars through social attacks, right? Because AI is so
Yes.
smart. But the big threat that we have right now is quantum computing. And I've seen everything from its 10 to 15 years out. No, it could actually be much shorter. I've seen that, well, really, it's only the first years or so worth of coins that haven't been moved. They need to be moved to a new address. But then potentially even moving to a new address exposes the key. There's, potential mining pool, whatever. Obviously, as somebody who's been building security around Bitcoin for a long time, how do you view the threat of quantum?
Slow burning, but dangerous. Yeah. Like I certainly would not state that I'm worried about it today, either individually or at my business or for our clients. Um, but it will be a concern in our lifetimes. Like that much I feel very confident about. Again, when exactly? Is it 10 to 15 years? Is it 5 years? Is it 25 years? I think there's this concept of Q day. Like when does the quantum computer become powerful enough to be a threat? And I think currently it's like 2035 or some number. I don't know who comes up with these numbers, but there's clearly a range and distribution of estimates of when this starts to become a real concern. I think something that's not necessarily talked about enough in the quantum computing discourse is how much Bitcoin is a factor, and in fact, the Bitcoin price is a factor in the incentive structure for driving quantum computing. I think most people who are working on quantum computing in a professional way, like researchers and scientists, think that they're building tools for understanding matter. Right. I think sometimes when quantum computing is described in a popular audience, we'll trot out the traveling salesman. We'll talk about cryptography and we'll talk about all these computery things. But a lot of people actually working in the field think of it as, well, this is just probably the most effective way to simulate quantum matter. And why would you want to simulate quantum matter? Well, because you want to do drug discovery. You want to engage in material science. You want to figure out new things that you can build in the world out of atoms. And quantum computers are also really, really good at that. And so from that perspective, what's the monetization pathway for quantum computing? Well, it's presumably you're going to come up with some new material or you're going to come up with some new kind of drug that has some great effects. And then you're going to make money eventually because of that thing. But that's very indirect. A new drug is going to have to go through trials. There's a supply chain. There's all sorts of issues. Like if quantum computers are just stealing Bitcoin, that's a lot easier for them to accomplish and a lot more direct path to monetization. But Bitcoin is still small compared to the potential revenues from revolutionary drugs that can be brought to market or new synthetic materials potentially. That won't always be true.
Or the
And just a few,
DoD, or the Treasury, or Wall Street. I mean, Bitcoin's small compared to all of those.
yeah, exactly. But in just a few cycles, right? If Bitcoin's price continues to appreciate by significant amounts year after year after year after year, at some point, just the idea of stealing Satoshi's coins becomes a meaningful incentive towards spending resources on optimizing quantum computers. And I think what's also not appreciated widely, perhaps, by the Bitcoin community is how nonlinear development and progress in quantum computing is. It's not the kind of thing where it gets incrementally 10% better every year, and therefore we can track and predict it. There are error correcting algorithms and new hardware approaches and stuff that were they to become successful could meaningfully change the roadmap and the estimates for when Q day comes along. So I definitely worry about these things.
But do,
I
do you think
think.
it's worrying about like the unknown, right? So it's like, if I'm worried about someone breaking into my house or attacking the United States, then what are the potential attack vectors of the United States or for my house? And then how
Mhm.
do I protect myself against that attack vector? But like, how do we protect ourselves from aliens? I don't even know. What would the aliens even do, right? So
Sure.
it's like sort of like we're worried about a what if maybe one day, but we don't even know what that attack vector would look like. So we don't really even know how to protect ourselves. So maybe Bitcoin isn't quite as big as that because we can see, well, it can attack the cryptographic key. But then, kind
Mhm.
of going back to what I said, it looks like we have some fixes that are already in line where we could just move the keys to a new signature, right?
There are definitely some plans. I think what's interesting is only in the last couple of years, I believe, did like NIST, for example, start start disrecommending certain cryptographic algorithms largely because of a fear of upcoming quantum computers, and started in fact recommending certain post-quantum encryption schemes because they're believed to be resistant against, whatever may be coming. So that's an interesting transition that like even at the, DoD government level, like they're starting to recognize, hey, maybe you should be switching over to this. Also, Google, I believe, and Signal have started in certain of their software to start using post-quantum cryptography for certain use cases. I think it's also built into a couple open source encryption tools like OpenSSL and something else I'm forgetting right now. So it's just starting to show up. I think it's for a long time, I think there was this idea floating around in that like somehow post-quantum computing is like not possible, or it's like really bad or really slow. And like it still has challenges, but it's a lot more practical than I think a lot of people give it credit for. I think what's missing is like the killer app of like, who cares enough to like want to invest in this and want to switch their systems over to using it and maybe deal with interface changes or, latency changes or other issues that are caused by this. I think Bitcoiners are going to care sooner than most communities, just because, again, I think it's easier for an attacker to make profit by attacking Bitcoin than it is to go out and do material science discovery.
But do you think since Satoshi warned us before he left about quantum, people have been talking about it since day one. They're still talking about it today. When we think about, and again, post-quantum, how do we know what post-quantum is when we don't even have quantum? But if we think about that, I mean, it seems like, and that's what I'm trying to ask you because you're the expert here, it seems like we have pretty good solutions to secure coins that we can move, but maybe it's Satoshi's coins that are at risk. Do you think that that's a sort of a fair way to look at it? Probably all the coins that could be moved could be safe, but Satoshi's coins would be probably the biggest thing that will be at risk in that post-quantum world? Or is that too simplistic?
Well, I would say a couple of things. It's like, number one, I think we have a good understanding of the capabilities of quantum computers, even if we don't have a good engineering capability to build the quantum computers. So we can make claims about, well, in the future, when quantum computers become more capable, here's what they'll be good at and here's what they won't be good at. I think those are things that we understand today.
Okay.
So that is what allows us to even define things like post-quantum computing algorithms and procedures,
Got it.
because we know that even if the quantum computer existed, it wouldn't be able to do this. Right? So we
Right.
have some confidence that this tool exists. And to your point, it definitely does exist, and to the point where it's being recommended and incorporated into certain software already outside of Bitcoin. Again, what's hard about Bitcoin is because it is decentralized, because no one runs it, because NIST can't decide to go change it for everybody. There has to be kind of a bottoms-up adoption process. And that's where I think some of the fear is, because, okay, fine, maybe you and I will, so first of all, Bitcoin has to solve the how will we get consensus about what changes to make, which of these schemes should we use, how should it be spelled and implemented, and all that stuff. Let's say we even solve that problem. Well, you and I can then go ahead and decide to take action. We can take our funds from whatever SegWit wallet we have today and move it into a post-quantum version of that wallet using whatever quantum or post-quantum computing technology Bitcoin decides to adopt. But again, what about Satoshi's coins, right? Like, we can't make that. Like, that's not a technology statement. That's I don't know, a policy statement or a consensus statement. Like, what should be Bitcoin's attitude towards coins that are not moved into post-quantum structures? Should we just let them get stolen? Should we, destroy them? There doesn't seem to be any great solution to this problem. And I think, unfortunately, because Satoshi's coins are so numerous, or at least what are thought to be Satoshi's coins are so numerous, this will be an issue at some point.
I think we just have to let it go. I think we just do nothing. That would be my guess. I mean, the market just absorbed 400,000 Bitcoin selling in the last 60 days. Like, we can absorb 1 million. By the time that comes in 5, 8, 10 years, like, we can absorb 1 million coins.
I like that idea because it is the simplest. And I often think especially in a decentralized context like Bitcoin's, the simplest idea probably wins.
And it's the most free market, decentralized way. Otherwise, we're making some changes to Bitcoin that could change the long-term trajectory of Bitcoin, would be my fear. I also think, though, is that, you talked about the bounty of being able to get those coins, for example, but I would think, and you correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I would think, solving this or creating this quantum computer is such a big task. It would most likely be a Google or OpenAI or something like that creates it, not some like indie hacker in Pakistan, most likely, right? So
Yeah.
it's going to be a Google or something like that creates it. And Google's certainly not going to go steal Bitcoin, right?
Or It's a nation state that has decided they don't want to play by the rules, and they have the resources and the desire to do this. I think
But if
that's
they
an option.
wanted to steal Bitcoin for economic gain and they destroyed the Bitcoin network, then all the work they did to steal the Bitcoin becomes futile and worthless.
I guess the question is, would it impact the Bitcoin network itself or not, right? Like Satoshi's coin systems aren't doing anything right now. They're just kind of sitting
Right.
there, right? So if they sort of entered the market, it could potentially even be positive, depending on, I guess, who took them, I
Yeah.
suppose. Maybe there's the argument that the United States rises to this challenge and decides that they're going to do it because they don't want anybody else to. The game theory is, I think, interesting because it's very price dependent. It kind
Yeah.
of depends on what you think the return is on taking these actions. Certainly, I think a silly thing to do would be to steal all the Bitcoin and then, like, I don't know, sell it for dollars somehow. Like that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And I agree that's not a real worry.
I think if they took Satoshi's coins, but the rest of the network still was secure because it moved to post-quantum, encryption, then it doesn't really affect the Bitcoin network, and so probably doesn't affect the price. And hey, congratulations, you got the bounty. Versus if they stole all the Bitcoin and crushed the network, then it all becomes worthless.
Mm-hmm.
And so then
Yeah, agree.
they'd probably be better off going and stealing money from the treasury and buying Bitcoin than in that case,
I mean, I think the worst outcome would be something like we dawdle, we fight amongst ourselves, we can't decide on a post-quantum solution effectively, and meanwhile, some crazy nonlinear change happens, and quantum computers just become fantastically easier to make because of some simple new idea that someone came up with. That's a bad combination.
Yeah.
We don't want that, right? We want to stay ahead of the developments in quantum computing to make sure that the outcome is more like what you described, which is everybody who cares, everybody who's actively holding their coins has plenty of time to go through this transition, and it's easy, and then it's really only the stragglers and the lost coins and Satoshi's coins which are left. That is probably one of the better outcomes, and I think in a situation like that, it would be pretty easy to say, just don't do anything, let them get stolen. I think where you might start to see more agitated and centralized concerns happen is if we aren't able to achieve that, if it's perceived as some kind of emergency that we have to take action now, that's usually the door through which centralization starts to enter.
Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of. Hey, if you like this short conversation I just had, you're going to love the full-length conversation. Don't miss it. You can go ahead and click right over here, and I'll see you over there.